Worldcon audience. Because I wasn't sure what sort of man he would be. So I gave him a call when I got to the convention and I heard he had checked in. And I asked him if I could talk with him yesterday in the bar for a bit, just so we could sit down and find out what sort of animals we both were before we got up on stage. And the delight of sitting down and talking with him was that he was as informal as I was, and that he is a very kind, warm, wonderful person, and I think you're in for a treat if you've never seen him before. So don't look at this as an interview, please. I would much, much more prefer that you're part of our party, because I think that's what it's going to be up here. It's going to be very, very informal. We're going to talk for a while, and then we're going to let you talk and ask questions. And it's my pleasure to introduce you to Alfred Bester. Alfred?
Where do you want me to sit, bro?
Why don't you sit in the middle?
Okay. Okay. Listen, if you guys are going to make this formal, it's no good. Come on, come close. So we can hock a Chinese. Come on.
Would you like a...
No, I'm not a beer type. Oh, thanks. That's better. Come on. And can I sit a little further forward?
Sure.
Would you mind? You got a camera on this or not? Is it all right if I sit here? Can you hit me with the camera down here? At the edge of the stage? No, I didn't hear that. What was that? Oh, all right, all right. Okay. I'm very, very sorry. I am not a public speaker. I like to talk to my friends, to people, to hock a China. You want to ask questions, you break in anytime, and we'll talk, you know. And I'll talk straight. I'm going to talk to you real professional like. So, Ro, go ahead. You hit me, and we'll go from there. All right?
All right.
Do you use the microphone so the people in back can hear you?
Hey, back there, can you hear me?
Move the microphone like here so that the tape recorder can hear.
Okay. Now, I don't know whether... Oh, am I live on these speakers? Can you all hear me? Okay, I'll try to moderate this loud, raucous voice of mine. I'll modulate it delicately, like a gent for the mic. Okay, now where do we go, Ro?
I want to ask, it is a stereotypical question that
Yeah.
I think every person asks at one time in his life or another in fandom, and I want to get it out of the way early so we can go on to some important stuff.
Yeah.
Where do you get your crazy ideas?
All right, I'll give you a straight answer. Really straight answer. You wouldn't think to look at me that I'm a lunatic, but I'm a lunatic. I am really demented. I have demented ideas all the time, and some of them I write down in my pocket notebook and transfer to my gimmick book, Ro, and others I look at and say, the hell with that, that's no good. It's not crazy enough. And these ideas come to me constantly, over and over again. Not the same ones, different ones, and they're all sort of put into a compost heap, Ro, and eventually out of that compost, like that, I was talking just the other day to a group of fans about Ted Sturgeon crossing himself, the greatest of us all. He did a great story called, I think, It. And it's about a guy who gets murdered and his skeleton gets dumped into a swamp and the body dissolves, and then the swamp, from its compost, forms a pseudo-flesh around the skeleton, and it emerges. It emerges. Well, my stories are its. They emerge out of my compost. What else can I say? You know what goes into compost? Well, that's what goes into mine.
Are you saying your best thinking is done on the John, or?
If only it were that simple. Yeah, I'd be very grateful. No, listen, I can't speak for my colleagues, other authors, but I speak for myself. I never stop working, never stop writing, never stop thinking. When I sleep, I dream story. When I'm awake, I think story. When any event happens to me, anything, the most innocent thing on the street, somebody jostles me, I say, oh, so sorry, and they say, sorry too, and I think, oh, now, wait a minute, I said sorry to him, he said sorry to me, what does he mean by that? And is there a story in it? And this is what's going on constantly. You never stop working. And People very often say to writers, I know they say to me, oh, you're lucky to be a writer. You can work when and where and how you please. Christ Jesus, I'm working 24 hours a day. Does that answer your question, Ro?
Yeah.
I also go to the John, you understand, but that's only part of it.
I didn't think writers went to the John. Seems somehow common. When we were talking yesterday,
Yeah.
and this ties in with the compost, you were talking about when you were in college,
Yeah.
and you were trying to decide what you were going to do.
Yeah.
And you went on a wonder yar,
Yeah.
and you came back, and I think they'd like to know what your decision was and how you went about arriving at writing full time.
Oh, God, oh, God, oh, God. It's a very sad story. But listen, fellas, don't think that, a flash of lightning appeared out of the sky and himself up there put his finger on me and says, you are a writer. Nothing like that at all. I spent too much time in universities, getting too many degrees. But really, it's not wasted because if you're a writer, it's all prep. You can always use it. It's part of the compost. You can always use it. If, on the other hand, you want to be an architect or something, maybe it's not so useful. But for a writer, nothing goes to waste. Well, what happened to me, Ro, is this. I suffered, whilst I was in my university years, I suffered from something at that time which was called TMA, too many aptitudes. And indeed, I suffered. That's the operative word. I suffered from too many aptitudes because there is a hell of a difference between aptitude and talent. And I was up to my ass in aptitudes, but I had no talent for any of them whatsoever. So I wrote music, and I drew pictures, and I was carrying on like a lunatic, and I didn't know what the hell I wanted to do with myself. The one thing I knew, I can hear myself as a junior at the university saying, I know that I'm not a writer, I said. I know, I was surrounded by guys who were writing little journals and writing poetry and all that, and I had contempt for them. I was down on the river rowing like a maniac and fencing and all that jazz. I had contempt for writers. I thought, oh, God, they're fairies. All writers are fairies. This is the way a jock thinks, What can I do? So, when I got the hell out of all these universities, and I was flagging around, really flailing and all, I didn't know what to do. I went to law school, I went to medical school, I tried them all. Nothing, but nothing. And my mom and dad got a little upset. They weren't pressing too hard, but they would like me to have slotted into something. Well, I had a wild experience, really wild. And actually, Robert Heinlein is involved in this too. Well, I'll tell you the experience right now. I said to Robert, hey, Robert, how the hell did you get into science fiction? He said, well, I'll tell you. He said, I didn't know what I was doing. I was a real estate agent. I was trying this. I tried writing. I wrote everything. I didn't know what. And I saw this contest announced in a magazine called Thrilling Wonder. And I said to him, yeah, I remember that. And he said to me, so I wrote a story. It was called Lifeline. And I was going to submit it for the contest, $50 prize. And that was a lot of money. I said, yeah, I know. And he said, but I found out, somebody told me that Astounding was paying a cent a word, and my story ran 7,000 words. So I submitted it to Astounding first, and they bought it. And that's how I started. And I looked them right in the eye, and I said, you son of a bitch, I won that contest, and you beat me by $20. So that's how I got started. Thrilling Wonder was running a contest. I, of course, have been reading science fiction ever since the days of Hugo Gernsback and adoring it, as we all do, of course. And they were announced this contest, so I wrote a story for it. Fortunately, Robert did not submit his, so I won the contest. And that's what committed me to it.
Now, that was the broken axiom.
Oh, Christ, why do you remind me? Yes, that was it. You don't want to know the original title? Thank God the boys, Jack Schiff and Walt Weisinger, changed the title. My original title, you're not going to believe this, ladies and gentlemen. The original title was, forgive me, Diaz X.
Now, the editors at Thrilling,
Yeah.
sort of, the three of you sort of got a relationship working there that led you on to more writing.
Yeah. It was very funny. It's a funny situation. You got to remember, kids, that I was fresh out of 16,000 universities and full of intellect and all that jazz, which took me 10 years to get rid of. It takes about 10 years to get rid of your education so you become human. I hear a fellow sufferer over on the right. And then I was hot. I had just read, reread, tree-read, annotated Joyce's Ulysses. And for me, it was the greatest book of all time. Incidentally, I went back and reread it about a year ago, and it doesn't hold up when you're an adult, when you're mature. It's for young people, really. It's too cold and too tough. But I was young, and I adored all that extreme objectivity of it, and it's cruelly objective, as you know. But that was all right. But I used to preach Ulysses without provocation, constantly. And these three editors, Jack Schiff, Mort Weisinger, who the hell was the third? I can't remember. I don't know, I can't remember. Used to take me to lunch after that broken axiom story, and I used to huck 'em a Chinik about Joyce and Ulysses over and over again. I used to break down laughing. But for reasons which I don't understand, they really thought I could write, or might turn into a writer. So they brought me along, and showed me how to write, bought a few stories from me, and what's more, set up a little syndicate, as I recall. God, it's a funny situation. We used to meet once a week, and they would provide story ideas, and I was to write them. And then after I wrote them, they would take them and edit them, and then we would submit them. I don't know, I think we invented some sort of a stage name for it. I can't remember what it was. None of them ever sold, so it's okay. But what happened was that suddenly comic books burst into a huge industry, and there was a desperate need for editors. So Harry Donenfeld at Superman raided Standard magazines and brought these two guys over to Superman comics. And there was a desperate need for writers, and they brought me along too. And I was taught and trained by a marvelous guy. He's dead now, alas, the dean of the science fiction writers, who, as a matter of fact, the dean of the comic book writers, who worked with Bob Kane putting together Batman, a guy named Bill Finger. And he was a wonderful writer, and he did one of the most generous things that's ever happened to me. It's a debt that I'm, to this day, trying to repay. He took me in hand I remember one rainy Saturday afternoon down at the Superman office, and he said, "Alf, I'm going to teach you how you write a squinker," which is the name that Manly Wade Wellman had invented for comic book scenarios. And he gave me squinker, isn't that great? Perfect name for them. Talk about onomatopoeia. He gave me a lecture, a long Saturday afternoon lecture, and he laid the whole thing out for me. And just, learning and listening to him overnight, I became a squinker writer. And I wrote, Christ, Jesus, I don't know how many. I wrote, let's see, I never wrote Superman, and I never wrote Batman. The boys, Jerry and Joe, wrote Superman and produced it. Bob Kane, with the help of Bill Finger, did most of all of the Batman scripts. But I wrote, now get down to this. I wrote the Star-Spangled Kid. Did you ever hear of it? I wrote the Green Lantern. Did you ever hear of that one?
Do you remember the Green Lantern's little number he does?
Oh, Christ, no. What do you mean? I wrote Captain Marvel. To this day, I don't know what Shazam stands for. What does Shazam stand for? Does anybody know?
Solomon, Hercules, Achilles, Zeus, Atlas, Mercury.
Well, thanks a lot, but I just as soon forget it again. That's about the dumbest thing I ever heard. I'll say... Not mine. I didn't invent it. Shazam, God help me. I also wrote Mary Marvel. We had a Mary Marvel, too. And, what the hell was Captain Marvel's real life name? Billy somebody.
Billy Batson.
Billy Batson? Yeah, Billy Batson. He didn't demolish any telephone booths, but he was quite a cat, Billy Batson. Oh, Christ, those days. We had a great time, though, writing squinkers. Beg your pardon?
We hear that he's such a strange guy and he died.
No, wait, who are you talking about, Lovey?
Talking about Captain Marvel Jr.
Oh, yeah, well, I wrote a few of them, but I know nothing at all about it. I know who my editor was on it. It was a guy who was the drama critic for the New York Times, subsequently, of course, for a year or two until they replaced him. Is that the right occupation? Stan was my editor on it. I knew very little in those days about Billy Batson Jr. or whatever it was, or I don't know, Mary Marvel or whatever the hell their names were. You can't keep track of them. We used to have, I go back now and then, I visit the old Superman crowd, and they say to me very kindly, they say, "Alf, you did great work in your time." And indeed, I was the highest paid, comic book writer in the business. You know what I got paid? $16.50 a page. How about that? You multiply that by 13, which was a lead feature story, 13 times 1650, and you can figure out what I got paid. Incidentally, the boys, Joe Schuster and Jerry Siegel, had, when they, they couldn't get a sale on Superman to any newspaper syndicate, anybody. Nobody wanted to touch it. Finally, in desperation, they sold it to the Superman, the comic group, which Harry Donenfeld led. It was a real sleazy outfit. They published, I think their biggest seller was something called Silk Stockings, a kind of a road company skin magazine with ladies...
I still subscribe to that.
Did you, Rogue? Come on. You know, ladies in negligee or something like that with one strap delicately pulled on over her shoulder to make her sexy, and of course silk stockings up below the knees, and this is what they were selling, you know, junk like that. And in desperation, they sold it to this guy, Donenfeld, and suddenly it emerged as a winner. Who's so surprised as everybody? And suddenly, the comic book industry was born, and Donenfeld expanded, and everybody got into the act. But here's the point. In those days, when I sold an original to the Donenfeld group, and I had to sign the same check. When they gave you a check, your first check, there was a release on the back which sold right, title, and interest to the feature to the Donenfeld group. And this is what Joe and Jerry were forced to do. They had to do it. And they used to scream bloody murder because although they wrote it and drawed it and produced the thing, they were paid at Donenfeld's pleasure. And I can remember once being in the office when they had I heard a big sound-off between them and Donenfeld, and they fought and they screamed bloody murder to get him to up to $400 per Superman script. I was going to say show. $400 for this winner, this thing that was making jillions of dollars. It was painful. It was agonizing for me as a writer. And I was getting, what, paid 13 times 1650. Christ, I was being paid half that for features that I didn't even, own any piece of. Oh, they had a rotten deal. It was awful. Hey, did I tell you about the time that Joe went down to Miami Beach?
No.
Oh, crikey. Joe Schuster, the artist, was demented. I don't know, he's from St. Louis, Cincinnati, or something like that. A real something,
You've just
Cleveland,
lost the St. Louis
maybe.
audience.
And to make it worse, I got to tell the truth about Joe. He was a left-handed artist. Now, that's as bad as a left-handed pitcher. Left-handed artists are all insane. He had never been out of whatever the town was. And finally, he decided he would go and see the world. So he put like $800 in his pocket in cash with a rubber band around it. And he took a bus down to Miami. And, with no luggage or nothing like that. He maybe had a brown paper bag with a change of socks in it or something like that. And the first thing he did, he left Miami, took the bus or whatever it was over to Miami Beach, and he was walking up and down whatever the main strip was in those days, looking at the luxury homes and staring at them and stopping and staring and staring. And people in the houses got a little nervous. Here was this creep is hanging around looking. What's he up to? Is it a ripoff? We don't know. They called the cops. So a black and white came and they picked him up. Now, I'm in the Superman office at the time, and we get a phone call. And this voice, with this southern accent says, "Hey, this here the Superman office?" Yeah. "Hey, we got a guy here. We got this funny little fella here who claims that he's Superman." Joe got so flustered when he got picked up by the cops that he began to scream, "You can't arrest me! I'm Superman! I'm Superman!" He pulled the money out of his pocket. He said, Look, I'm Superman!" So they hauled him off. And they put him in a pokey. And we had a phone all over the place and finally located one of the officials of the firm who happened to be in Miami at the time. We had to go and bail him out and take him by the other ear and drag him home. And that was the end of Joe. Oh, his worldwide trip. These were lunatic days. But as I was saying to a young writer back there just a few minutes ago, it was very important for me and for others of my colleagues because, as a young writer, you've got to get a lot of rotten writing out of your system. And the comics were perfect to break in. Jesus, I got more rotten writing out of my system, I think. But I got hit by a guy yesterday. He came up to me and he said, "Listen, I've just finished a piece on so-and-so and so-and-so, and would you tell me how you wrote Solomon Grundy?" I said, "Who? What? Who? I never wrote anything called Solomon Grundy." He said, "Oh, Jesus, I made a terrible mistake. They all said that you wrote it." And I put it down. I said, "What Solomon Grundy?" It turned out he was talking about a book story that I had written back in 1945, which is now a goddamn classic, and that isn't their business. And I'd forgotten it completely. So maybe I wasn't quite as bad as I thought I was. I think I was dreadful. But God bless Solomon Grundy. It reassures me a little bit. Oh, God. What is it, Ro? What do you want me to talk about now?
Well,
Outside of myself.
there's an mystery.
Thank you.
There is something, I think everyone now has an idea of how you started out in science fiction.
Yeah.
And now I want to start a little fight.
Okay.
And some fans are very protective about writers who write other than science fiction.
Do I ever know that? Yes.
Does anyone here know what Holiday magazine is? You were editor for that for what, 15 years?
No, I was not the editor-in-chief. Caskey Stinnett was the boss. I was the senior literary editor of the magazine. I was on a par with the art director. Not that long. I wrote for them for about 15 years, but it was only the last 5 years that I was senior editor of the staff. Actually, what happened was, they came to me once, they hit me with the job, and I said, you sons of bitches, I know why. It's cheaper for you to put me on staff than it is to pay me piece by piece. And they said, yeah, but we offer you security, job security. I said, oh, well. It was a new challenge, actually. I'd never been an editor before, and it was nice to break in as an editor, to learn the editing trade, which now makes me much more sympathetic toward writers and editors vis-a-vis the difficulties they have with each other, because I can really now see both sides of it. I remember once, back in the early days of science fiction, when I was first writing for Thrilling Wonder magazine, and one of the editors, Mort Weisinger, took me to, there was a regular meeting, apparently monthly, of the then pulp science fiction writers, guys like Otto Binder and Manly Wade Wellman and several others. And I was quite fascinated to go. And you remember, now I'm in my early 20s and fresh out of college and a frightful intellectual snob. Oh, God, what a snob I was. That's why it took me 10 years to get rid of it. I said to Weisinger at one point, after the first few things I had attended, I said, I'm really not very much impressed with these guys. Why do you give them so many assignments? And he gave me an answer then, which I understood later when I became an editor. But I did not understand then. He said, now look, they may never write a great story, but they never write a bad story. We can always depend on them. And Christ, Jesus, if there's anything an editor wants, he wants a writer he can depend on. And the writers who can be brilliant at times can be impossible at times. One of my first assignments when I was an editor at Holiday, the guy I had to handle was John O'Hara. Jesus, he was impossible. Impossible. There was no way of handling him. And he would hand in the first place, he did, I thought, a shocking thing. He handed in first drafts on yellow sheets. He didn't even bother to rewrite. All marked over, and rewritten in pencil and stuff like that, which I thought was pretty contemptuous of us, because we were trying to run and were, in fact, running a real classy magazine. And you could never get that bastard to rewrite. Never, never, never. And yet, two of them would be dogs, and the third would be brilliant. What are you going to do with them? What are you going to... You got to buy the dogs for that third brilliance. On the other hand, a guy like Steve Birmingham never let you down. He may have been clever at times, not particularly brilliant. He was much better than good, and therefore Steve got all the assignments I could give him because I knew I could depend on him. Now, when writers and editors quarrel, sometimes they do in the science fiction writers magazine, and I read the correspondence, my heart breaks, on both sides, because I understand the editor's problem, and I understand the writer's problem, and it's a pity. I think that every editor should serve time as a writer, and every writer should serve time as an editor, and all of this difficulty would be over with, I'm sure. They would see both sides of it. It's unfortunate that this is a needless conflict, but it does go on. It's too bad. Horace Gold, for example, at Galaxy, achieved a dreadful reputation. And yet Horace was my editor on that first book that I wrote, The Demolished Man. And he was, for me, now come on, knock it off. For me, we're talking shop, fellas. Thanks to all the same, but we're talking shop. Many writers fought bitterly with Horace because Horace was an editor, by God. If he didn't like something, he nailed you for it. He wanted more, he wanted better, he wanted better. Now, since when I wrote that, I was, in writing a television show, I was in the entertainment business. I understood this because, Milton Berle said to me once, and he was right, and I've used it as a slogan all the time. He said, Alfie, great shows aren't written, they're rewritten. And he was, by God, right. Great stories aren't written, they're rewritten. Everything has to be rewritten. And what Horace would do is he would demand that his writers rewrite and rewrite and rewrite until it was perfection. And they began to get resentful about it. I, on the other hand, who was used to this routine, got along beautifully with Horace, as I indeed get along with Ben Bova, who is not as demanding as Horace, but on the computer connection, for example, Ben and I had long sessions, and he had many suggestions, most of which I followed. But many writers objected, and yet, seeing it from Horace's point of view, all he was trying to do was something which writers should have been grateful for. He was trying to get writers to write over the top of their head, better than they knew that they could write. That's what he was really trying to do. And a writer should be grateful for that and should not hate an editor. On the other hand, an editor should know how to be tactful about doing that. And that's, of course, the difficulty. End of Alfie Bester's lecture on writers and editors. Next question.
There's a new program on the radio. It's what, a year and a half, 2 years old?
Oh, yeah, about 2 or 3, yeah. Two years old, yeah.
That you can hear on CBS, the Radio Mysteries Theater.
Oh, Jesus, yeah.
One show a week is nice. And the reason for that is...
Moreau, you exaggerate. They got a lot of good writers on that show. I'm just one of 2 or 3 damn good writers. No, just one of them. What's his name? Hey, Red, you anywhere around? Yeah. What's that science fiction writer who does shows for High Brown? He's got a name like Dan or something like that. Jack Dan, yeah. He writes for it. He's a good writer. And the actress who used to be Sam Levine's girlfriend, what's her name? She was in Dead End. Oh, I can't remember her name. She writes fairly good. She's kind of a soap opera writer. And, of course, Ian Martin, the world's worst actor and the world's worst writer. But he's faithful. He can be depended upon to turn out the world's worst script every week. However, I must confess that his son, what's Ian's son's name? Chris is a brilliant young actor who's now running a theater in New York, an off-Broadway theater. Everybody admires him. He's brilliant, a great director. I don't know, I've never seen him work as an actor. And so apparently the talent skipped one generation, and Chris has got it all. Go ahead, Ro. What should I say? You want me to talk about the show itself?
What's it like writing a show once a week?
It's hell. You know, sometimes you have ideas and it's all right, and sometimes you have ideas that you don't like, and then it gets a little tougher. Sometimes you haven't got an idea, and then you walk around and go to saloons and talk to people, and you're waiting for something, waiting for himself up there to hit you with lightning and say, here's an idea, my boy. Never happens. You drink too much, you talk too much, you go home, you don't sleep, you drive everybody around you mad, you pace, you go on. But, and sometimes, agony, you miss your deadline, but most often you hit it with something that you don't like, and this is the hell of it. You turn something in that you really don't like, and everybody says, Jesus, man, it's the greatest you've ever done. On the other hand, just happened to be 2 weeks ago, I turned in what I thought was one of the greatest scripts I've ever written, and it got bounced. You can't win, fellas. That is, you can't trust yourself. You just don't know. We used to, we always had in the theater, we had a going expression. You go backstage after a show, and you're visiting a particular performer, an actor, and if he is in his dressing room and he expands and says, I was great tonight, invariably he was terrible. And if a writer ever says to himself, as I have done, oh my God, this is great, something up there says, my boy, it's going to be rejected. And sure enough, it is, by God. You can't trust yourself. It's the damnedest thing. If any of you can straighten me out on it, I'd be very grateful, and I'll pay $20 an hour. No, that's not enough. $75 an hour. Yeah.
Now, you've written radio, you've written television.
Yeah.
You write science fiction.
Yeah, magazine pieces, novels, short stories, yeah. I'm a working stiff, I write, that's all. The only thing I've never been able to write is fiction for a woman's magazine. I've never been able to make that scene. Never done. Hey, did I... Talking about that, I told you the story about George, our sister magazine was Saturday Evening Post, about George Horace Lorimer. Did I tell you that? Let me tell you kids about it. Lorimer, was kind of like the Pope in Philadelphia. And when he walked through the offices of the Saturday, this is the famous editor, George Horace Lorimer. When he walked through the offices, there was a death-like hush as he passed by. He was kind of like Henry Ford, who would do the same thing. And Lorimer had no sense of humor, it seemed, whatsoever. And he was terrifying. The atmosphere in his office was like a cathedral. You tiptoed in and you hushed and you lowered your head until he deigned to speak to you. A terrifying man. And yet, he had something in his latter years because he ran something very daring for the Saturday Evening Post, which after all, you know, let's face it, was strictly a country appeal, a regional magazine, which featured stories about tractors and businessmen and salesmen and young Americans on the make, and virtue was triumphant, and et cetera and so forth. He ran a very daring two-parter. It was kind of almost a novelette, let's say a long novella, whatever, in 2 parts. And the first installment ended with the girl inviting the boy up to her apartment after the theater for coffee and eggs, or ham and eggs, or whatever it was. End of the episode. They're there having their ham and eggs and chit-chatting and talking and getting cozy. The next installment, a week later, opened the following morning with them in pajamas having breakfast together. Unmarried, you understand. Thousands of letters came into the Post announcing this outrage. And Lorimer, of all people, came up with the greatest answer. He had a form reply printed and mailed back to all of the people who had written complaining. And the line was, "The Saturday Evening Post is not responsible for the behavior of its characters between installments." God, he was great. He really was. What now, Ro? What are you going to talk about now? Am I taking you too long? You know, I can stay here forever. Don't pay any attention to me.
Traditionally, science fiction has been among the worst paying markets in the world, and fortunately of late there have been some very, very good writers who are helping to change the field. Certainly the old guard has done a wonderful job, and there have been new people like Joe Haldeman and George Martin who have
Yes.
have brought the field along and has brought the field to the public eye.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still not a great paying field in comparison to other markets. And yet, as recently as the Computer Connection, you're writing science fiction.
Yeah.
With all of your talents
Yeah.
and all of the media that is open to you
Yeah.
to write in. Why do you write science fiction?
Well, for 2 reasons. I don't know if either of them is valid, but here are the reasons. In the first place, I really am a renegade. And there comes a time when I get just fed up with the restrictions of the media. I just can't stand it anymore. And I don't know which way to turn. Science fiction, you know, all you people may love science fiction. I love it too, but I love it for an entirely different reason. I love science fiction because it is the last of the literary forms in which the sky is the limit. No holds bar, you do what you're damn well pleased. You can't say that about any other form. You can't say it about piece writing, about script writing, about anything. But in science fiction, you can do what you damn well please. Any idea. And in the early days, when I was writing radio and then television scripts, there was many a story which I would propose, and no, they wouldn't. No, it's too sophisticated for the budget can't stand it. No, it's a little too raunchy. No, we can't do that. And in desperation, I would turn to science fiction and do it as a story, because, you know, as a writer, you've got to have an audience. You've got to have an outlet. You've got to present it in one form or another. Science fiction is still the same for me. Well, apparently now I am in a state of being kind of fed up with the media, in all of which I work, and I've gone back to science fiction to do a few things. Now, I'm still, you know, doing magazine pieces and stuff, and I'm supposed to go out to the coast and do a movie version of one of my books. Whether I will or not, I don't know, because I don't like the coast all that much, to tell you the truth. Again, committee work, you know. It's a drag. Which one? Wait a minute, hold it. Tiger, yeah. I don't know which title, you know, it's got so many goddamn titles. But science fiction has always been my love because I feel freest in science fiction. Now, it's true that in the old days there were restrictions. I know that John Campbell raised holy hell if you had, you know, the word S-E-X in any form, in any story. He was an awful prude. But even that's abandoned now. I hope a little bit. Even Ben had a little trouble with the Computer Connection. What was the Indian Giver in that version? there were some passages in that. He said, look, Alf, please, you've got to cut them. He said, I'm sorry, it's not my fault. He said, but we have a very conservative readership, and they'll kick like steers if they read these 2 paragraphs. And I said, sure, come on, Ben, we'll take them out. No trouble at all. So, you know, the restrictions still exist. Curiously enough, only about sex. I don't understand why, because I would think myself that religion is a hell of a lot more dangerous, and everybody in science fiction is messing around with religion in all directions. But sex is kind of still a little iffy. You know, like it's dirty. I don't know what the hell it is. But still, science fiction is the only completely free medium that a writer has. Now, of course, it doesn't pay. It can't compare, you know, to script writing or magazine piece writing, for God's sake. Even publishers, book publishing, you know, they will pay an advance on a full novel what I get for a half-hour script. You know, it's ridiculous. But if you get tired of script writing, sometimes you will, a script writer will do a novel for a publisher for the same money, simply because of the freedom and the release from constraints. And that is why I love science fiction most of all. Alas, I'm sorry to say, too many of my colleagues do not take full advantage of that release from constraints. Not in their writing. Their writing can be pretty raunchy. I mean in their ideas. Their ideas too often are very tired, rather repetitious, you know, of stuff that's been said over and over again before. They just say it in a different way with more 4-letter words or whatever you want. I'm sorry about that. As a matter of fact, I was down at the art show just a while back before I came up here, and I said to Kelly Frias, I said, Kelly, you know, I've looked and the stuff is beautifully executed, but there's not a new sound here on the walls. I don't see anything, and it's our job as creative artists to create a new sound, to say something new and different and in a different way, which alas, I'm trying all the time, sometimes with great disaster. But, and of course, Kelly took me over and showed me a couple of things I had missed, which did have a kind of a new sound to them. Well, it's the same thing in science fiction. This is the only field where you can make a new sound. And I wish more of my colleagues would make a new sound. Of course, many of them do. I just wish all of them would, that's all. You know, you take a guy like Tiptree, Claude Weiner Smith, you take Ballard. Ballard, is that right, in England? Crazy old Brian Aldiss. These guys are making new sounds all the time. They're just, you know, I worship them. They're just marvelous. Ray Lafferty, Christ, I wish he'd start writing again. He's just marvelous. These guys are great. I wish a hell of a lot more writers would write the way they do. I wish that I could write as good as they do. They're just wonderful. As well, as good. I'm weak on spelling, too. But that's why I love science fiction, because the sky really almost is the limit, provided, you know, you're not jumping out of bed to reach the sky. That's all I can say. Yeah, bro.
The videotape person over there
Yeah.
handed me a note, and I'm afraid if I don't ask it,
Yeah, go ahead,
he'll
shoot.
cut us off.
What is my name? Alfred Bester.
It says, ask him about his novel, Who He.
Oh, that one. Yeah, that was my first novel. That was the one. I was writing a cockamamie show for a cockamamie ventriloquist called Winchell, Paul Winchell. Oy, yeah, Jerry Mahoney, God save the mark. God save me. Oy, Christ, what a show that was. You know, fortunately, Winchell is out on the coast, so he's not going to hear about this. You know, he was a Mr. No Talent. No talent. And I had to write dramatic sketches for him. I had to write continuity for him. I had to write a whole goddamn show for him. And it was agony. And he had an agent who drove me up the wall. He drove me up the wall. He had all kinds of problems. And the show just drove me mad. I wrote it for, I don't know, a year, 2 years, however long it lasted. It was just murder, just absolute murder. And finally, in complete fury and desperation, when the whole thing was over, I was going to write a takeout on the goddamn television business, which I hated. And I used the show, the Paul Winchell show. I've even forgotten the name of the show. That's how I rejected. As the basis. And all of the characters in the novel, well, not all, but the show characters are from that show. Who He, yeah, about television, the first book. The thing that grabbed it, I think, grabbed the readers was, it was the first book about the business which used the inside slang of the business. I used all of the inside jargon, which at that time was unheard of. And, you know, silly expressions which we all know today, like, you don't say, is that a real fireplace? You say, is that a practical fireplace? And you don't talk about the corner of a room. You say, I'll meet you over in the bookfold. You know, that sort of talk. That's, I think, what grabbed people, I guess, most of all. The plot was fairly simple. It's an old plot of mine, which I've been writing all my life, about a guy under compulsion. He doesn't know it. And it had a fair amount of success. I think mostly because of the... hey, wait a minute, I got a story that goes with it. Jackie Gleason bought it for the Moon Pictures. He owns it. I had to sell it outright. I was very poor at the time. And I'd never met Gleason. I finally ran into him at a saloon, Toots Shor's, naturally, and was introduced. And he said, hey, he said, yeah, I bought that book of yours, didn't I? I said, yes, Mr. Gleason. He said, you want to know why I bought it? I said, no, Mr. Gleason, thank you very much. You know, I got paid. That's all right with me. He said, no, I'll tell you. He said, that book has got the greatest gimmick of all time. And I sat back. I did some clever things in it, and I was waiting which one he had picked up. He said, it's brilliant. It's about a guy who gets so drunk he doesn't know what he's doing. And I'm sorry to say, I looked at him in amazement, like I'm looking at you, and I said, Mr. Gleason, you could have had that for free, for God's sake. It's the oldest thing in the world. Well, that's what happened to Who He. And that's how I wrote it, and that's the history of my life. And are we short for time now?
What time is it? I don't have a watch.
Should I get off?
Or,
You want to wrap up, Ro?
well, is there a committee person here who's getting nervous? If there's no committee person here, then fuck them. You know,
Listen, Ro, some of my best friends have been on committees.
I want to interrupt for just a second because I'm left-handed, the left-handed artist you were talking about earlier.
you and Joe.
And I wear my watch on the right arm. And I've been looking at my wristband all weekend long, wondering what time it is, and I see MidAmeriCon, and I realize it's later than I think. There's a question over here, and I've seen some other hands around.
Go ahead,
So why
shoot
don't we
me.
open it up for general questions? And I think I saw you first.
Wait, I can't light this goddamn match. Hold it. Oh, jeez. Matches are my worst enemies. Matches and ice. Thank you. I see that. Okay, got it. Shoot.
There were an awful lot of anecdotes about in Astounding's old times when Kay Tarrant used to love to knock out all the salacious and other little bits.
Oh, was she the one who did it? I thought it was Campbell himself. Yeah.
Well, he laid it off on him.
Yeah.
But a lot of guys were trying to get away with slipping something past Kay.
Yeah.
Pages. Do you have any good anecdotes on that?
I got one, but not about Campbell. I got one about Superman, though. Sometimes, you know, when you wrote like an African-type show with natives, you would write gibberish to imitate native language. And the editors would always rewrite the gibberish. So finally I said to them once, I said, what the hell are you doing, for Christ's sake? They said, we know you, Alfie Bester. We think you're sneaking dirty words in. So I said to them, well, as a matter of fact, I'm not, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do, I said. I'm going to sneak something in. I'm going to sneak it past you, and it's going to be in full print, and you're not going to spot it. And that'll teach you a lesson which you richly deserve. And I bided my time, and I waited. And finally, I was writing, I don't know what the hell it was, some story. It was an 8-pager or something, a shorty. And I made, yeah, well, you know, there were 8, 11s, and 13s. I was above writing 6 pages. That was too short. That's for the mere. So I wrote this 8-pager, or maybe 11-pager, and I very quietly named one of my characters Mr. Merkin. It went through, and after it was in print and on the stands, I presented Webster 2 to them, and I said, look it up. And they was humiliated, and they never rewrote my gibberish again.
There's a question over here.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could tell us about the Superman script.
No, I never wrote Superman. Oh, you mean the...
The movie thing that you were originally supposed to do.
Oh, that was a mishmash. It was terrible. And I'm told, somebody's just reported to me that it's still having terrible trouble. What happened was this. The guy who produced, some sort of a frog, who produced the Three Musketeers, whatever the hell it was, something like that, which was a sleeper that turned into a huge hit. Wanted to, and a big moneymaker, a big box office draw. Had, before it became a big draw, wanted to do a Superman moon picture. And the boys called me in because, although they had fine writers on the staff, none of them had any script writing experience. So they called me in as an old-timer and a script writer and stuff, and we discussed whether or not I should do the scenario for it. And I was a little iffy about it, quite frankly, because Superman, I should say comic books and comic book characters were too far in my past. I didn't really feel like I wanted to go back to it. But I agreed, because I'd liked them all. I particularly liked the editor-in-chief then of the group, a guy named Carmine... Infant, yeah, I know he's left now. I liked him very much, and of course I was an old friend of Julie Schwartz, who incidentally, I got Julie Schwartz's job with Superman. I placed him. No, I'm not boasting. This was in 14,000 years ago. And of course, Murray Boltinoff, we were old friends too. So I liked the idea of working with these guys. Well, what happened was that we talked it over and discussed it, and I said, you know, I can't go back and do the old Clark Kent nonsense. This is out of the question. If you'll let me modernize it, let me just update it a little bit, I can go through with it. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll do a presentation for you of how I think the character should be handled in the stories, etc. And I said, no charge or nothing like that. You know, it's one colleague to another. I'm trying to help. And, you know, if you like it, whether you want me or not, you can use it and keep it. What happened was that we were getting along fine, but the producer of the show, now with a hit behind him, had no faith in me, for which I did not blame him. He said, you know, this guy's got no credits, really. He's got no feature credits. And so instead, he set out and he hired the guy who wrote, of course, The Godfather. What's his name?
Puzo.
Yeah. Who was, you know, very nice about it and said, look, I don't know anything about Superman. And they said, it's all right, we'll teach you. The producer said, we'll teach you. And so I, of course, backed off, said, great, fine, you couldn't pick a better name. It's a real draw, it's a box. And don't forget, the name is part of the box office draw. And a name will help to sell. And I understood that, and I withdrew and helped as much as I could, and that broke off at that point. I've just heard recently that he was the first of 3 writers. They're now on their 3rd writer, and this thing is still a mishmash, and they're still trying to go forward with it, which does not give me any satisfaction at all. Don't think that I have, you know, a kind of spiteful revenge about it. I feel very sorry about it, because these guys are all professionals. And, you know, as pros, we got to stick together. You don't knife anybody. You don't bitch anybody. And I would like, if anybody can tell me, perhaps you can, what the hell went wrong? See, I'm not in the scene, so I don't know. Isn't that a murder? I know I did one thing for the gang. I said to them, listen, and I fought with them side by side. I said, one thing you have to hold out for, and I go right down the line with you. This is when I was still, you know, the putative writer. I said, you've got to hold out for final script approval. You've got to hold out for that. And they said, well, gee, can we? And I said, yes, you can. You must. Do not lose control. And they fought, and I fought along with them. And I know they've still got final script approval. So thank God for that, for their sake. But I don't know what's happened. You were about to perhaps say that you know something I don't?
At the Chicago Comic-Con, Jeanette Kahn was now the editor, publisher.
Oh, really? Yeah, is he a good man? I don't know him. Oh, it's a lady. Oh, forgive me, yeah.
Right.
Is she a good man?
She's a very nice lady.
No, I mean, is she a pro?
She's a pro.
Oh, good. That's the final, final praise.
But, the only bad thing about it is that there's much the feeling of, we'll give a good front, but back in our minds, we know things are in very bad shape. We're just trying to do as best we can. And I think they're as worried as anyone.
Yeah, I don't like that much. That's a queasy situation, isn't it? Yeah, that's too bad.
There's one question I'd like to jump in on.
Yeah, Ro, go ahead, shoot.
I don't know if you've read Larry Niven's Man of Steel, Woman of Kleenex.
No, I haven't, but it's a great title. No.
One question because I'm an editor of a technical magazine, and we do things that if it saw print, we'd be out of business the next day.
Yeah.
When you were working with comics,
Yeah.
did you ever write up filthy, dirty, obscene scripts for your characters to go through, just to sort of get the limitations out of your system?
No, never. I don't know whether to be proud or ashamed to admit it. Let's say in between. No, I have never had that kind of feeling of restraint. I don't know whether I'm slightly prudish or tremendously prudish by nature. I don't know what it is, but Occasionally, for the sake of my character, Ro, I buy a few skin magazines off the stands and read them to see the kind of material they're running. It's things like Penthouse, and it's something called, I don't know, oui, or some French word. Vous, ich, moi, I don't know, moi. I don't know what the hell it is. And, a few others like that. And I read through the stuff, and I find it, Ro, that if that's a release, I think it's the wrong kind of release, simply because, look, let's face it, Ro, I'm queer for ladies. And I love love, and, I love every aspect of it. And this kind of writing, what you're suggesting, denigrates it. It turns it into something repellent, and I think that's an awful thing to do to sex. I think it's just dreadful to take something as lovely as that, and by being graphic and detailed and whatever you want to say, to get this kind of release. No, it's not for me. I've never needed it whatsoever. It's like somebody said to me once, ever been with a professional doll? I said, no, there are too many amateurs. I've never needed that kind of release. You tell me why. I don't know. I just haven't needed that kind of release. I've never desired to write that sort of thing. Sometimes I read the quote, new wave, unquote, and I tease the boys about it. I know what they're doing, of course. They're trying to they're just trying to break the old taboos of science fiction. All right, fine. But come on, get it out of your system once and knock it off, fellas, because that's not, it's not real writing. It's meaningless. It's mechanical. And skin magazines are the mechanics of sex, and that's not for me. I've never been interested in that sort of thing. Now, if you ask me, did I ever write a romantic script? Yes, I have, and that got bounced too. No room for romance in comics.
Alex?
Yeah, who wants to do Stars by Destination?
Oh, say it again, please.
Who wants to do Stars by Destination?
Who wants to do Stars My Destination as a moon picture? That's the Tiger, right? It was bought originally by a guy and his partner, Ray Wagner, and John D'Amore. Red, have I got that right? Yes. And Ray split up the partnership to go with MGM, took the book with him to MGM. MGM fooled around with it for a while and decided no, and I could have told them. They said they couldn't find the right director for it, and they sold it back to John, who's got it now in Hawaii, and if he can find the right director in Hawaii, he's a better man than I am. And I've been on the phone with him a few times, and he wants me to do the script, maybe. I'm going to meet him in London next month, and we'll talk it over. We'll hock a chinik about it. I still think it can't be done, but he seems to think it can be done. Maybe he can talk me into it. I'll try, I do write, as you know, I write in a tremendous panorama, and because I need a big canvas, and I just don't think it's possible to limit either of those novels into film language. The first one, The Demolished Man, the boys hired an English writer who did a scenario for them, and they paid him, and he scooted for London. He was no fool. And I read it. They handed it to me. They wanted me to do a new version of it, to do a real version of it. And I read his original, and I was absolutely flabbergasted. He had, taken the title and taken the Esper quality and written a brand new story with brand new characters and everything else. It had nothing to do with the novel. And I said, to Ray and John, I said, well, you want to do this, go right ahead. It's not mine. I don't care about it. You paid for it. You might as well do it. They said, no, we want yours. And that's where the whole thing broke off. He was in London, and I was not, I was out on the coast at the time, and I was not ready to, as our union insists, I was not ready to share credit with this guy on my new script. He would have to have gotten credit on mine. And that's where I broke off on that. So that one's hanging fire still. And little remains to be told. Mr. Deasy became a greengrocer. Mr. Pickwick is to be seen daily in the Dulwich Art Gallery, accompanied by his favorite servitor, Sam Weller. And question, I got a question. Say, I see a hand way back there. Was that a hand, or were we scratching something? I guess you were scratching something. No more questions? Oh, yeah? Oh, yeah?
Over there.
Yes. Why is it that an editor will never use the title of the writer's
I finish with a story, which will answer your question. Before my training as an editor, what?
We gotta repeat the question.
Oh, yeah. The question was asked, why is it that an editor never uses the original title that an author puts on his story? Well, a hell of a lot of authors, including me before my training at Holiday, don't know how to title their stories. I once sent out to Tony Boucher and Mick McComas at FNSF out on the coast. They had asked me for 2 stories, and I sent them 2 stories. And they were forced to reverse the titles on the stories. I put the wrong title on each story, and they just reversed them. I was flabbergasted. Now, looking back at it, they were absolutely right, and I was an idiot. But it needed 5 years of training at the magazine to learn how to title things. And let me tell you, that's a high art, learning how to title. There's a guy, an acquaintance of mine, named McAleer, who's just done a biography of Rex Stout. And I've been helping him because I was an old friend of Stout's. I've been helping him along, and he finally sent a letter to say the book is finished, it's with Little Brown, it's being copy edited, and he gave me the title, and oy, what a title. And I had to write him a long letter about it, telling him if it's not too late, that title has got to be changed. It was a real campus, long-haired title, you know, something like An American Original Wither, you know, that sort of thing. Terrible, just awful, and not grabby in a bit. But title writing is not easy. It's very, very difficult, and very often, well, I was talking to Fred Pohl last night, and I was telling him that I thought that the Space Merchants is, if not the, at least one of the top 2 science fiction novels of all time. I think it's a classic, really. And I was telling him how I preferred the Space Merchant title to the original in Horace's magazine. It was originally called Gravy Planet. And I said that I thought that Space Merchant was a much better title. And he said, yes, but he still preferred his title, which nobody wanted. Horace didn't want it. The publisher didn't. The hard, you know, trade edition didn't want it. Red, what was it? What was his title? Yeah, Merchant of Venus. I said, oh, Fred, forget it. So, in answer to your question, very often the best, and Fred Pohl is a fine, fine author. He doesn't know how to title his own stuff.
You managed to get a merchant story.
Oh, really? I'm told up front that he did write a story using that title. He did. Fred doesn't give up, does he? Yeah.
Do you still prefer the title Tiger Tiger to the Stars?
I do too, yes. I do prefer it. But Mac Talley, who was then with NAL, came up with Stars My Destination, and I wasn't about to fight Mac on it. So I went along with it. And of course in England it is published as Tiger Tiger. I still wanted the original spelling with a Y instead of an I, but they wouldn't go that far. I guess they felt it was a little too long here or something. You know, none of us are safe on titles. Let's face it, we don't know. It's enough to write them, for God's sake, let alone title them. An editor's got to do something for a living. I know.
There is a question over here somewhere. There.
Shoot, don't be afraid.
Scream.
I am not afraid.
I think The Stars My Destination was a terrific book.
Thank you, thank you.
But was the plot similarity to The Count of Monte Cristo conscious or unconscious?
Conscious as all hell, of course it was. My God, yes. And there's a funny story goes with that. With me, there's always a story. Have you got time enough to hear a story? Or no, are we running over?
Well, we'll take one more question, but we've got to repeat the question. The guy up there.
Oh, I do. I'm sorry. The question was the similarity of The Stars My Destination or Tiger Tiger to The Count of Monte Cristo. Was it accidental or deliberate? And I said, of course it was deliberate. And it was. Question now? With them out, oldies. I had to read them. Read them. In one magazine was a fascinating piece on survival at sea by torpedoed sailors, and the record was held by a Philippine assistant cook who had survived on a raft on the open sea for 4 months. But a throwaway in the piece, the genesis of the story, he had been passed 3 times by Allied ships which would not turn aside to pick him up because it was a trick of the Nazi submarines to put out a decoy like that to get ships within torpedo distance. And at that point, a huge electric light bulb lit up over my brain, and off I shot to England with my typewriter and my thesaurus and a ream of paper, and thus it was born. Is the minute up now?
Do we have one last question?
Okay.
Anywhere? Yeah, there.
When you're first starting out, do you have any trouble getting editors to go along with your, the strange things you do with time?
In the beginning, yeah. In the beginning, yes. Not now, of course. Now they're used to it. I'm working on a book now. It's going to be about 100 art pages. I've written the whole beginning chapter. Oh, am I having any difficulty? with editors about art pages. Not anymore. The book I'm working on now is written like a full music score.
Okay, now we're about ready to wrap things up, and unfortunately, as you know, this is not a large enough hotel, and Alfie's been next door. Every time he comes over here, he's been surrounded by people asking for autographs.
I like it.
And
What's the matter with you?
I'm going to use my position here on the dais. Quite selfishly, I have the January 1952 issue of Galaxy.
Never sin. You see, it catches up with you. What's in that one?
The Demolished Man is the cover
Christ,
story.
God.
Will you autograph this for me?
Yes, I will.
And I want to thank Alfred Bester very much for spending time with us.
Take care. God bless. Annoy me. I love it.